This is always such a sobering reading. And as I've said before, we're always hoping we get next week where we get to talk about how we rise again. It's nearly unimaginable and it's shocking. And obviously that's why Swamiji chose this story, that somebody who was presumably as great a soul as Judas was, to be able to be in the company of a true avatar, to be one of these chosen 12 who would hear his particular teaching and be invited to be attuning himself to these teachings, could get so pulled off the path, and by something as just seemingly so obviously absurd as money. It's just hard to put your mind around it for those of us who have been on a path for any time, and particularly these teachings that so, as Yogananda said when he talked about communities and through all of his teachings, starting communities of high-mindedness and simple living, that it would not be at all about the material aspects of the path. And here's Judas, who is stealing money from Jesus, literally, and who blatantly turns him into the Sanhedrin, which is the sort of court of the day, very disrespectfully, but obviously to point him out in the crowd, refers to him as rabbi, so that the court would know exactly who Jesus was. It really holds for us what delusion is, that extraordinarily tacit assumption that we can live with, that God's will is so clearly aligned with our will. And it's challenging. And here we see one as great as Judah who could fall prey to this. It's particularly poignant for us right now, and gave me pause last night. And I did take a moment. Again, I think you all know by now from my sermons, I have a very personal relationship with God. I talk to God all the time. I take him everywhere. And I have no qualms at screaming at him. And last night was one of those nights, how could you give me this reading right now? Because many of you in this room know we're in this sort of, it's as unimaginable as the story of Judas is, the situation we're in with our community, where many of us live 3 miles down the road. And I know a lot of you have heard this already, and many of you received a letter from us just a few days ago where we're in a discussion, if you will, with many people who are involved with our community, many of them owners. I myself am a part owner too, so that's not a distinguishing factor, people who have invested in it. And in this circle of people who's speaking to each other, we don't all agree on how we should move forward. So here we are. There are many who feel that we should, at this point, sell our community. And I'm not going to give you the details because they're not what's important. There are others of us who think, how could we sell this community? It's been 30 years of really drawing Yogananda's energy and become a sacred haven for these teachings with all of its magnetism and magnificence, only as it's related to the master. Does happen to be physically beautiful, and there are other aspects of it. But here's what's tricky about it. All of the people who are in the discussion are dear old friends. We've all studied the same teachings. Most of us, I would say for decades, But the truth is, probably most of us, for lifetimes, we are brothers and sisters. We are, as they say in India, cousin brothers and sisters, meaning cousins even are considered that close, like brothers and sisters. And here we are with a difference of opinion, standing sort of on a battlefield of sorts, saying, gee, I wonder what's going to happen. We could just as easily be the main characters in what could be the next Bhagavad Gita. What's going to happen here? So we love each other. We respect each other. But what's fascinating is it's like watching 30 people, 20 people standing in a circle, all looking at the middle of that circle. So if I stand here and I look straight ahead, I see one thing, and it's true. And then if I move over here and I'm standing here, I have a totally different perspective. And that goes on for 360 degrees. So you start saying to yourself, and I've said to myself for months now, what is the truth? Could it be? Because I feel really certain, like Judas did, that I see this thing through truth. Of course I would be meditating on it. Of course I would be asking my teacher, my Jesus, which is Jesus, of course, but Paramhansa Yogananda, show me the truth. For almost 5 months now, every day, many times a day. What is the truth here? What is meant to be happening? And I know that everybody else involved in this saga is doing the same thing. So I say to myself, could it be? Could it possibly be that I'm so right and they're so wrong? And I feel so humble about that. How could it be? And in my rational mind, it makes no sense. And then I'm faced with this dilemma. I am not a self-realized being. And when you're not a self-realized being, these answers, even if you happen to be Judas, they are very hard to come to. And yet, we cannot be paralyzed with indecision. That's not what we can do on the path. We have to do our very best. We have to pray as much as we can pray. We have to really go right as close to the source as we can get, do our best, and then move forward. So it's not like we can stand still until we know absolutely for sure the way a fully self-realized being can know what is truth here. Because every one of us, other than these avatars, are subject to the influence of Satan. This is what Satan is. Satan is innate in every one of us. Satan is that, he's a part of, it's that part of the infinite consciousness whose job it is to draw us out, who's part of the cosmic vibration that is spinning us further and further out, away from our center. And as that happens, our perspective changes. That's just what happens. The further away from center we go, the different places that we spin on that circle, our perspective changes. This is precisely what happened to Judas. He just got confused. He got really, as we would say, spun out, spun around. He forgot what was going on by a very real force that exists in all of our lives and that is to be respected and acknowledged. Swamiji says, really loud, he says it directly in the reading, beware of delusion, respect it. He even says fear it. He doesn't mean cower in its presence, because that's what we'd be doing all the time. But he means fear it, like understand how hard it is, that it's always in your life, and do your best. Bring all of the power that you can to be aiming towards truth all the time, to be asking ourselves, how do we find that truth? Which direction do we go? What are the tools that we have? I'd like to talk a little bit about two different types of delusion, or two different ways that delusion manifests in our life, because they're important. The first way is a way that we talk about very often. We talk about how we think that material desires will bring us happiness, or the next partner. We talk about those desires that pull us out, that are really of the senses. It can be a new partner. It can be the way we can feel selfish or greedy. It can be anger. They're part of our everyday life, and they're actually easier to recognize. And when they're easier to recognize, we can make a conscious effort to resist them. Because the more resistance we bring, the harder it is for delusion to get in. We have to open the door to delusion for it to come in. So it's there, it's waiting, it's trying. But our behavior, our thoughts, our desires have a lot to do with whether it comes and grabs us. So these delusions that we can recognize, gee, I'm having a judgmental thought, and it's obvious. And then we ask ourselves, is that how I want to live? Is this bringing me happiness to feel this way? Do I want to just be greedy? No, of course not. But we watch ourselves be pulled. When I was thinking about this yesterday, I was thinking, I'm not really a shopper. I know a lot of people find a lot of solace in shopping, but I don't really like shopping. I don't think I've been in a store to buy clothes at least in over a year, but not even in an online store. Somehow I'm not drawn there. But if one of you said to me this afternoon, come on over to Stanford Mall with me, and I went to the mall with you, and I've tested this, because of course people want to go. And I walk into Nordstrom or Macy's or buy all those fabulous shoe stores, oh boy. Suddenly, not only do I want everything, but I need everything. You look at those black shoes and you start thinking, do I really have a pair of perfectly comfortable black shoes? Or all the things that follow. So we can see that happening and say to ourselves, how am I going to avoid that? Really, as I said, with judgmental thoughts, or if we feel anger coming up in us, what are we going to do to transform and transmute that energy? That's what we want to do on this path. We want to gather all of our energy and not allow it to be going down and out. No, we want it to draw it in and up, and we can do it like that. Master used to say that many astrologers wanted to do his reading, and they would always come up and do his reading. And he didn't quite say that he didn't want to hear it, but he said as soon as they pointed out to him where the tough spots in his life were going to be, he said, that was it. I brought all of my willpower, all of my energy right in those times to prove what these God-given qualities can do, to show people what it means when willpower is stronger than the attraction, because that's where we have to get. And we can do it with those easier to see delusions, attractions, those things that, we've only been sidetracked for several million lives by it, so chances are it's still going to have a hold on us. I know I told this story sometime in the past, but it came to me again last night, so I'll share it. It's a true story. At Stanford in the late 60s and 70s, they did a group of studies over many, many years that became known as, and you can Google it, and please do, because it's a riot. You will get a very good laugh, which is good for us, called the Marshmallow Studies. And what they did is they took little children. Somewhere I looked at them again last night. They are really a riot, but funny in that way where there's such a deep truth in them. They took these little kids, like 3 to 8, into a room. Nothing is in the room. That would be hard for many of us. The kids were told they were going to be in this room for 15 minutes. And here's what they did. They put a marshmallow in front of them. And they said, if you can sit here for 15 minutes and not eat the marshmallow, when I come in 15 minutes, I'm going to give you another marshmallow. So if you can use self-control, use your willpower. They didn't say these words. These kids were 3, 5. But they said, you can either eat the marshmallow and have 1, or you can wait and have 2. Now, of course, this whole thing was being filmed, and it is a riot. These little kids, and then they're left. There's nothing in the room but the marshmallow and the kid and the cameras, which they don't know. And the kids do a million different things that are so funny. They get up close and they stare at it. They pound their fists on the table. They turn their back on it. They run and hide in the corner of a room. One time they brought twins in, and the twins are kind of feeding off of each other. And before you know it, both of them, some of them literally, they stick their tongue out. They lick the marshmallow. Some of them see what little pieces of the marshmallow, how tiny a piece can they get so nobody will notice that they ate any of the marshmallow. They punch it down, then they try really hard to get it back into shape. There's one little girl, this adorable little blonde, she's got to be 3. The woman's talking to her. If you just leave the marshmallow, she just picks the marshmallow up and stuffs it in her mouth. It's very funny. The funniest, they're all funny, but a very funny piece is at the end of a study. The little boy has been driving himself crazy. They all put their finger on it, almost all of them. I will tell you, though, this is important, except for one child who comes in and he goes like this. For 15 minutes, he stares at the marshmallow. He does it. He succeeds. But another kid who lets the marshmallow be there, she walks in. She says, great, you did a wonderful job. Hands him the second marshmallow. He takes both of them and shoves them in his mouth as fast as he can. Now, it's a funny story, but it's really, I'll tell you one other thing. They studied these children for years, for well over a decade, and they found that those children who could control themselves, it was a study about delayed gratification. Fair enough, we can call it that, or we can call it willpower, we can call it commitment, we can call it courage, we can call it words that are more meaningful now to us than delayed gratification. That's not for most of us. Those children went on overall to be more successful, happier. They studied them, they gave them forms to fill out. Really having the ability to resist, again, to use our willpower, just as Master said, particularly when things are hard, really help them grow into human beings who are going to find their way to a more contented place. No surprise, really, but anyway, comical, at least a humorful look at the path. The other kind of delusion are the delusions that we cannot see. We don't see them. We don't even know that they have us unless we're on this path, unless we're really using the teachings, unless we're willing. I mean, the pure, utter genius of Swamiji. You know, how he picks introspection, how important that is, the willingness to know ourselves, to look at how we might be moving forward in a good direction, means moving towards the divine, or how are we being fooled? The courage it takes to look at that first premise of who we are and to ask this hard question, to stop in the middle of situations that just seem so utterly obvious and that you might not know to question them. And we are so good at making arguments for them. I have to say, in a way, it's terrifying to me in moments because I'm such a good arguer. I know the kind of arguments that I can do, the way that I can debate things when I want it to be right. You know, we just had a class. It was part of our, whatever we called it, but our lineage class. And in the class on Yogananda, there was a woman who came, and I don't remember what aspect of Yogananda we were talking about, but she shared with us, she said, one of the most meaningful things that I've learned recently is what it means to wait, to sit in the silence and listen. And she said, of course, I've learned this lesson the best with my husband because I always think I know, and I'm always telling him the truth. I'm always showing him what's the truth. And it always shocks me that he doesn't just listen and hear the truth. She said, but if I every once in a while remind myself, be quiet for a moment. Let there be a pause. Pause. She said, lo and behold, every once in a while, more often than not, he says something in my silence that I know instantly to be the truth. She said, and I still continue to be a little surprised that he actually had something to say when I was so sure that I knew the truth. And it was just, nobody in this room is laughing, but probably a lot of us should be. We all know that place. And it's a remarkable experience to have to say to yourself, wait a minute, what do I need to do the best I can do to make sure that that which I believe to be the truth, that money needed to not be spent on any kind of wonderful cream to rub the feet of our Lord, but rather should be taken and given to the poor. And I know that to be true. My teacher himself said, we have to take care of the poor, and on and on. Now, Swamiji doesn't believe Judas's motives were so high, but be that as it may, we can still always make an argument that supports us. There is no way through this with those kinds of delusions that grab us, that we don't see. Once we get the inkling, might there be something askew with my thinking? Might there be? We have to offer it up to God. We have to continue to offer it up to superconscious solutions, to the divine, to that aspect of ourselves which is not struggling with Satan and with delusion, but that really has the ability to know the truth. This is where meditation and all of our practices come in. This is why we continuously come back there. Because, at first the challenges are easy. They're more like the ones we can see out there. And then as we move along our path, and as we move closer and closer and closer to our own self-realization, which we're all wanting to do, guess what? The challenges get harder. God made us, but he made all the pitfalls as well. And he's not surprised when we fall in. And he's not even upset with us. He knows life is riddled with them. Those are those cross currents of ego that are there so that we can learn and grow. It's not that we fall. It never matters that we fall. It's what do we do once we're down? I shared with you once a story. I was walking through a park. This happened a few years ago, but the image often comes to mind. I took a fall a few weeks ago in a hike that I was leading with 17 other people, and I was sort of down for the count. And this image flashed in my mind again because it was so poignant. There was a little boy there who was like, I don't know, 4 or something, a big little boy, stocky, strong, all muscle. And I watched him, and I could see that he was headed to a fall. And his mother was sidetracked. And sure enough, he flies up in the air. He comes down flat on his face. This is also true. And he stayed there for a moment, stunned, the way we all get stunned when we fall, no matter what kind of a fall it is. And then I watched him look around. First, he located his mother, who wasn't noticing him at all. Okay? No reason to go down that road. She's not even looking at me. Then he looked around. I immediately turned my back on him because, kids will do that. Then they cry if you're looking at them. And then I just waited, and he just laid there for a minute, and then he stood up, and he went back to playing. Now, was that going to be the only fall in his life? Of course not. He's going to fall over and over and over. But that strong little boy with all of that energy, and in less than a minute, he was off and running and playing with all of his strength, energy, with all of his life. And it just comes to you, absolutely, that's what you do. Get up and keep going. That's all that's ever wanted of us. How many times have we heard, God doesn't mind our deficiencies. He doesn't mind our falls. He hates our indifference. That's all. We have to turn to God. So that's what we need to do. We need to keep coming back in every way that we can, no matter how ashamed we are, no matter how embarrassed we are, no matter how many times we've made the same mistake. We're on a path. We're headed there, and we need to check in with our teachers. It's interesting about Judas because Judas immediately knew what he did. Really, they took his guru, who he had just turned in, and crucified him. It was, in the end, not a hard lesson to get. And we all know he immediately committed suicide. Also not great on the spiritual path, but it did show immediate awareness and remorse. And then we've been told by Yogananda that in a life in the last, 75 years or 100 years, he was reborn as a disciple of Ramakrishna, and he attained freedom in this life. So the story ends well. And all of our story will end well. It has to end well. We all know how the story ends. What we think will bring us happiness in life, that's the direction we take. We need to really watch our thinking, watch our thoughts, look where we direct our energy constantly. Master, is this the correct thing to do? Am I on the right path? Am I hanging out with the right people, listening to the right music, showing up for sadhana, for satsang? Help me. I can't do this on my own, but I know you can. You solve it. Show me right now what is the truth. You show me, and let me hear it in a way that I can know without a doubt it's your voice, not mine.